The Erta Ale ambush. On the night of January 17, 2012, a group of 27 tourists camped at the rim of Erta Ale volcano in the Afar region of northern Ethiopia. The volcano sits deep inside the Danakil Depression, one of the lowest and hottest places on Earth, and its lava lake glows red against the black sky. The group had trekked up after their armed escorts remained at the base, as was common practice at the time. They laid out their sleeping gear on the hardened lava rock and settled in for the night. The tourists had come from Germany, Hungary, Austria, and Belgium, drawn by one of only a handful of permanent lava lakes in the world. Some had been photographing the glowing crater for hours before lying down. The night was quiet except for the low roar of the lava below. Then, before dawn, as many as 40 armed attackers moved through the darkness toward the camp. 2 Germans, 2 Hungarians, and an Austrian were killed. 3 others were wounded. 2 German tourists and 2 Ethiopians were abducted and taken across the border into Eritrea. The survivors were stranded on the crater rim for more than 12 hours before a helicopter rescue was organized through the German embassy in Addis Ababa. The 2 German hostages were released nearly 2 months later. 5 people did not come home. Tourists still visit Erta Ale today. Armed escorts now accompany groups more consistently, but the Afar region remains remote, and the volcano continues to draw people toward one of the most isolated places on the planet. The Dunedin Star Rescue. On the night of November 29, 1942, the British cargo liner Dunedin Star struck submerged rocks off the skeleton coast of Namibia while sailing south toward Cape Town. The ship carried 106 passengers and crew, along with war supplies. The captain ordered a distress signal sent into the dark Atlantic. The skeleton coast earned its name from the bones of shipwrecked sailors and bleached whale remains. Portuguese navigators called it the Gates of Hell. Cold ocean fog rolls in from the Benguela Current and obscures the rocks until a ship is already upon them. Anyone who made it ashore had almost no way back out. The desert stretched endlessly behind them. A lifeboat transferred some passengers to the beach but became stranded in the surf. A rescue tug ran aground before reaching the survivors. An aircraft that landed on what appeared to be firm sand broke through a salt crust and became bogged down. A land convoy drove for days across the desert from Windhoek. 2 rescuers died in the effort. The survivors endured weeks of exposure before the last of them were brought out. Today, the rusting hulk of the Edward Bolen, wrecked in 1909, sits 400 meters from the shoreline, slowly swallowed by advancing dunes. The fog still rolls in without warning, and the surf still breaks against the rocks with the same force it always has. The Madidi jungle disappearance. In the dry season of 2003, a Swiss backpacker entered Madidi National Park in the Bolivian Amazon without a registered guide. He had spoken to locals in Ruranabeke about the trails and believed he understood the basic route. He carried a small pack, a water bottle, and a map covering only the outer edges of the reserve. He told the guest house owner he would be back in 2 days. Madidi is one of the most biodiverse places on Earth. Trails inside disappear within hours of rain. The jungle floor is layered with roots, standing water, and vegetation so dense that visibility drops to a few meters. Rivers shift course seasonally, erasing landmarks that existed weeks before. He did not return after 2 days. A search party found his footprints near a flooded river crossing, then nothing. The jungle absorbed every trace. No body was ever recovered. His disappearance was recorded by Bolivian authorities and became one of several cases of tourists entering Madidi without guidance and failing to return. Park rangers now require visitors to register and hire certified local guides. The rule is enforced at main entry points, but the park's borders are vast and porous. The jungle does not distinguish between the experienced and the unprepared. The Oymyakon freeze. In January of 1984, a Soviet meteorological station in Oymyakon recorded a temperature of negative 67.7 degrees Celsius. It remains one of the coldest temperatures ever measured at a permanently inhabited location on Earth. The village sits in a valley that traps cold air during winter. Pipes freeze underground. Diesel engines must be kept running continuously or they will not start again. In the winter of 2017, a South Korean travel blogger arrived in Oymyakon to document life in the coldest village on Earth. On his second day, he walked out at dawn to photograph the village. The temperature was negative 52 degrees Celsius. He removed his outer gloves briefly to adjust his camera settings. His fingers lost sensation within 90 seconds. By the time he returned inside, 2 fingers showed signs of deep frostbite. The nearest adequate hospital was in Yakutsk, nearly 900 kilometers away. A local driver transported him through the night on barely maintained roads. He reached the hospital after more than 12 hours. The doctors saved his hand, but the damage was permanent. He lost partial sensation in both affected fingers. Oymyakon now draws a small but steady stream of cold-weather tourists each winter. The cold here is not a spectacle. It is simply the condition of life, and it does not make exceptions for visitors who underestimate it by even a few seconds. The Sinabung pyroclastic flow. On the morning of February 1st, 2014, Mount Sinabung on the island of Sumatra erupted with a sudden pyroclastic flow. The volcano had been showing elevated activity for weeks, and authorities had established an exclusion zone. 16 people were inside that zone when the flow descended. They were farmers who had returned to check on crops, believing the activity had stabilized enough to risk a brief visit. The pyroclastic flow moved at speeds exceeding 100 kilometers per hour, carrying superheated gas, ash, and rock fragments down the mountain's flank. It reached the fields within seconds. 14 of the 16 people died where they stood. 2 survived with severe burns. Sinabung had been dormant for 400 years before reawakening in 2010. Its eruption patterns proved unpredictable, with periods of quiet followed by sudden explosive activity. Entire villages were permanently relocated. The landscape around the mountain became a gray, ash-covered terrain where nothing grew. Visitors still photograph the volcano from approved viewpoints. Guides remind tourists that the exclusion zone boundaries are not suggestions. The mountain has erupted again since 2014, and the ground around it remains unstable. The Darvaza night camp. In the summer of 2008, a group of 4 German travelers camped overnight at the edge of the Darvaza gas crater in the Karakum Desert of Turkmenistan. The crater had been burning since Soviet engineers accidentally collapsed a natural gas cavern during a drilling operation in 1971. The fire had never gone out. The crater measured roughly 60 meters across and 30 meters deep, its floor covered with hundreds of individual gas flames roaring continuously through the night. No fence existed at that time. One of the travelers walked to the rim after dark to photograph the flames from directly above. The ground at the rim was uneven and crumbling, where the heat had weakened the surface. He leaned forward to frame a shot and felt the edge shift beneath his boot. He caught himself on his hands and knees. His camera dropped into the crater and was gone. He lay still for several seconds before crawling back. His companions had not seen what happened. He said later that the drop below had been completely silent, except for the roar of the fire. There was nothing to grab, and the heat rising from below was immediate and intense. A fence was eventually installed in 2018. Tourists still climb over it. The crater has begun to diminish as authorities work to reduce the gas flow, but the drop into the burning pit below has not changed. The Cliffs of Moher fall. On a clear afternoon in August of 2015, a 22-year-old American student climbed over the safety barrier at the Cliffs of Moher on the western coast of Ireland. The official viewing platform was crowded. He wanted a photograph from beyond the railing, where the grass ran directly to the cliff edge, and the drop to the Atlantic was unobstructed. The cliffs rise to 214 meters at their highest point. The grass near the edge conceals soft, eroded soil that can give way without warning. The wind along the cliff top changes direction suddenly and with considerable force. Dozens of people have died at the cliffs over the decades, and the site has one of the highest death tolls of any tourist attraction in Ireland. He positioned himself near the edge and turned to face his friends for the photograph. A gust of wind came from the side. His foot slipped on the wet grass. He went over the edge without a sound. The Coast Guard helicopter reached the base of the cliffs within 30 minutes. His body was recovered from the water. The safety barriers have been extended and reinforced multiple times. Signs warn visitors not to cross them. Every summer, people climb over them anyway. The Atlantic below remains exactly as it has always been. The Dallol toxic shore. In March of 2017, a small group of researchers and 2 tourists arrived at Dallol in the Danakil Depression of northern Ethiopia. Dallol sits at roughly 125 meters below sea level and holds the record for the highest average annual temperature of any inhabited location on Earth. Hydrothermal vents push acidic brine through salt formations, creating pools of bright yellow, green, and orange that bubble and hiss in the heat. The ground crust is thin in places, and the pools beneath are highly corrosive. A French photographer stepped slightly off the established path to frame a wider shot. The crust beneath his left foot cracked. His leg plunged through to the knee into a pool of superheated brine with a pH close to 0. He pulled himself back immediately, but the liquid had already burned through his clothing and into the skin beneath. The nearest facility capable of treating chemical burns was hours away across rough desert roads. By the time he reached treatment, the burns extended from his ankle to above the knee. He required multiple surgeries and spent weeks in hospital. He retained the use of his leg, but the scarring was severe and permanent. Dallol remains one of the most extreme environments on Earth. The colors of the place are extraordinary, and the temptation to move closer is constant. The pools do not look as dangerous as they are. They look like something from a painting, bright and still, until the crust gives way. If you liked this video, hit subscribe for more like it, and let me know in the comments what you want to see next.